Alright, I got a lot to say and a little bit of time to say it, so by popular demand, it's time we look at Fire Emblem Three Houses for the Nintendo Switch. And right off the bat, I'm going to say that I was extremely excited for this game. But considering the narrative dumpster fire that was Fire Emblem Fates, I erred on the side of cautious optimism. But once this game was released and I actually took a crack at it, those worries were put to rest. Right off the bat, guys, this game is fantastic. And a big indicator of that is how Intelligent Systems seems to be listening to fan criticism and willing to trim some fat, while at the same time not being afraid to add some new details. No time traveling or child conception tomfoolery, and certainly no transdimensional shenanigans, just the good stuff, and maybe, just maybe, a few imperfections that leaves room to grow. So, let's take a look. The game takes place in Fodlan, a country that's split into 3 different factions, which the game doesn't even try to hide the fact that they're going to go to war eventually, but I'm not going to get into that for the sake of spoilers. But before that, we're introduced to the game's main character, Byleth, a mercenary turned conscripted professor who seems to have a certain connection to this world's goddess, which again I won't get into because spoilers. But yeah, zeroing in on that professor bit. After saving a few students from a bandit attack, Byleth and their father Gerald are sent to Garreg-Mach Monastery to be conscripted into their service. Gerald as a knight of the Church of Seiros, and Byleth being a professor for one of the 3 houses that make up the Officers' Academy. After choosing either the Black Eagle, Blue Lion, or Golden Deer House, it's up to Byleth, and by extension the player, to teach these students and guide them into becoming great knights, soldiers, and warriors in service to Fodlan and its people. Now I fully understand that that's just the bare minimum of this game's overall plot, but I'm doing you guys a favor by not mentioning anything else, because the narrative of this game is a huge step forward compared to Fates and Awakening. Unlike the previous 2 titles, which just feels like a bunch of smaller stories strewn together, Fire Emblem Three Houses utilizes a cause and effect style of storytelling. Everything that goes on in the game happens for a reason, and most, if not all of those reasons, are explained to you. This extends to this game's fantastic world building and its characters. Let me just say that this might be the most solid cast of characters that we've ever had in the series. Thanks to a polished support system, voice acting, and fantastic writing, every single one of these characters is lovable in some way. Even the characters that I thought I was gonna hate at first, particularly Hilda, Lauren, Sylvain, and Ferdinand, once I actually got to know them, I loved them. Which made it all the more heartbreaking once certain things started happening. But I've talked enough about the narrative. Let's get into the meat of this game, the gameplay. I gotta admit, the whole professor thing threw me for a loop at first, but once I actually got my hands on it, I realized that this school system makes room for so much customization. Sure, certain units specialize in certain talents, but there's absolutely nothing stopping you from teaching these students everything you can to prepare them for the hardships ahead. This also includes the main character Byleth, who is not only a great silent protagonist in their own right, but has the highest potential for customization, so you can pretty much build them any way you want. The different missions and map layouts thrown at you facilitate these new mechanics well, and while I do kind of miss the battle support system from the previous games, its spirit lives on in the battalion and adjutant system. Not only does this allow you to include more of your students into the battles, you are now controlling whole squadrons of units. It actually feels like you're commanding an army in this game, and that's awesome. And this mechanic becomes very useful in one of my new favorite features in this game, monster battles. This was a fantastic idea. All in all, this is what Fire Emblem Fates should have been. Between the time skip that happens in the middle of the game and the 3 different paths that you can take, all compacted into one single title, Fire Emblem Three Houses ends up being an overall extremely solid and enjoyable Fire Emblem entry. But it's not without its gripes. In particular, I have 3 of them. First of all, while I did praise the narrative, and don't get me wrong, it is really good, having to facilitate 3 different what-if scenarios causes the storytelling to become a little sloppy. The game has a bad habit of forgetting the golden rule, show don't tell, and at the risk of spoilers, it causes the finales of each of the routes to become a little rushed. Secondly, Garreg-Mach Monastery is way too big for its own good. With so much to do and so much to see, this place becomes overwhelming at first and incredibly tiresome later. And no, you can't just take the back streets. Even with the fast travel mechanic, if you're going to get the most out of this game, you're going to be combing every inch of this monastery every time a new month comes around. Especially because this cast of characters can't seem to keep a handle on their personal effects. Screw this lost item feature! And my final gripe, and I'm going to admit that this one might be personal, I feel like this game is way too easy. Not a cakewalk, mind you, but between the new customization mechanics, opportunities to power up your units, and the Divine Pulse feature, playing this game on normal mode is downright trivial. That's certainly good news for those who simply want to go through the game and experience the story, but for Fire Emblem veterans, I actually recommend starting on Hard Classic. And don't worry too much about permadeath, the ability to turn back time really mitigates that issue. Plus, there's always casual mode. But even with those complaints, I'm happy to say that Fire Emblem Three Houses ticks all of my boxes for being a fantastic video game. So much so that I'm willing to call it the best of the new generation Fire Emblem. Because if this is the standard for the franchise going forward, I've got some fantastic games to look forward to.